Off. Hey, everybody. I'm back again. Second time guest this year, Stephen Matthew Clark. Stephen, I think our first conversation it felt like the summer because I remember it being really hot.
Mhm.
And I've gotten to know Stephen past that conversation and just really come to admire a lot of the work you're doing and wanted to have you come back on to the show here and talk with all of us about two things today. Number one is what's misunderstood about the prison system and prison reform? What are things that I think I'm speaking to like North Americans for the most part, US and Canada? What are things that we maybe believe are true about the prison life that maybe aren't so much? So that's the first thing I want to talk to you about today, Stephen. And then the second thing is the work that you're doing to make a difference for your fellow incarcerated folks, not just in Maine where you are. And I'm going to have you introduce yourself again and give us a little context about who you are and why you're here for those who didn't listen the first time, and what kind of work you're doing and what can make a difference. So I want to say on a personal level, I'm really glad to have you back on. I know I got a lot of feedback on that first episode. It's very powerful for me, really shook me. I trust that you got some great feedback about that as well. So Stephen, welcome back, first of all. Like, where are you joining us from today in the world? And maybe give the audience just a little bit about who you are and why you are well suited to talk about those two topics.
Well, Jason, first off, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you to anybody in all the audience, everybody that's listening to the show that had an interest for me coming back. And I think probably first, just to discuss with you, I'm actually in a maximum security prison right now. I'm in my prison cell, zooming in with you and doing this podcast with you. I've been here for the past 18 years. Um, I've been in a maximum security prison here in Maine, and over the past 18 years, I have worked diligently to understand myself better, to atone for the choices that put me here, and to make a difference in the world, to give back and to try to create change within the system. And also, over the course of time, I've worked, as we talked about last podcast, I've worked to earn several different degrees and several different certifications. Many of and much of the research that I've done has revolved around the system of mass incarceration, so I can gain an understanding of how to create solutions. I believe in falling in love with the problem to create the solutions. So really falling in love with some of the problems that are here at the Maine State Prison, but also in the prison system overall.
Yeah. So just a couple things there, Stephen. One, if you want to hear the story of why Stephen is recording with me right here today on November 21st, 2023, we covered that in the previous episode. We're not going to talk about that today. We already talked about that. The second thing, and I do want to address this again, is it is unique for somebody who's sitting in a maximum security prison in their cell to be on Zoom and have an internet connection. And I've seen what you have: a nice microphone, you have technology. That's unique. We cover a little bit of this on the previous episode as well, but I would like to talk about what it is about Maine that makes it unique as a lead into some of the things that we maybe like the general understanding of prison or the lack of understanding. So what is it that makes it unique that has you and I become friends, talk on Zoom, be able to look at each other and record podcasts? Because number one thing, if somebody said, hey, do you want to interview somebody who's in prison and from their jail cell, I would say that's unlikely that they're going to have the technology to do so, at least on video, but that's not true. Number one stereotype is what we see. Oh, I could come visit you and I could pick up this phone and you're going to be behind glass and we could have a quick conversation and then the guard's going to say enough and that's the way it's going to go. That's not how you and I are communicating today. I am not in Maine. I'm here in New York and you're in Maine. So that's the first thing. So let's talk about what's created this environment for you to be able to be here with us today.
Man, such a good question. And this is an important answer as well, I feel like. So you think about the system. First off, let's just talk about the problem. We have a 77% recidivism rate. What that means, close to 8 out of 10 people that get out of prison will get out in return. Most of it's for technical violations because they didn't have human, social, and financial capital to succeed in society. They had no hope, so they fall backwards and they come back. They go to what they're used to and what they know. So with that being a problem, leadership. The leadership in Maine, we are underneath the leadership of Commissioner Randy Liberty. Commissioner Randall Liberty is a heart-centered person that has been in leadership roles for most of his life, whether it be the military or it be the police department that he worked for a long period of time. His leadership has opened doors that never would have been opened. And in fact, I got to say this, his leadership, the ripples of his leadership are being felt throughout the entire nation right now because there's other prison systems following suit with the work that he's doing. How am I on Zoom with you? Well, that's a really good question. Thank God for Commissioner Liberty and Warden Matthew Magnuson. My warden, Matt, I call him Matt, believe it or not. This guy is so progressively minded. He's responsible. He makes smart choices. So saying that, over the past 18 years, I've earned an associate's, like I said, 2 bachelor's, a master's degree. I'm currently working on a PhD. I've worked with over 1,600 people in the system of mass incarceration, facilitating groups. I have really worked to change my life and lead by example in this place. And I think that is one of the leading factors why I'm in my prison cell right now, able to be on a Zoom call with you, recording this video about the awakening and about the work that we're doing.
Yeah. So you've proven that you're using this for good, the technology for good, that you're, and part of your education and the work you're doing. Excellent. Yeah. We talked a little bit about this for those listening on the podcast as well, like what Maine does differently, because this is not, if we kind of lead into the next part of the conversation, I think the general person who's seen a movie or television show does not see somebody doing a podcast from their jail cell. And not only being a guest, but you're a host of a podcast too. And you do video content. Amazing. So let's kind of move into there and talk about, let's call this part of the episode, Stephen, like things that are misunderstood, or things that the public does not understand or think we understand that we don't. So I'm going to actually turn this over to you because I don't understand. So I'm going to be looking for you to educate us.
Yeah, well, let's just look at what the public does understand. And last night Jason and I were having this conversation a little bit earlier. Last night I was researching. I'm interested, why is public perception the way that it is with people in prisons? So we think of like Nike. When you think of Nike, what do you think of, Jason?
Michael Jordan, Nike Airs, Just Do It, branding, athletic wear, shoes.
Yeah. That's it. You think of the swoosh and you think of
swoosh,
Just Do It. And that's really the marketing campaign that Nike has put out there. They have embedded in our consciousness, just do it, the swoosh, sports. So when we reflect on Nike, we reflect on shoes, we reflect on Michael Jordan, we reflect on Just Do It. That is what arises in our consciousness subconsciously, because it's so embedded within us. So therefore, if you think of prisons, what do you think of? I mean, being completely honest, outside of me, when you think of what a prison is, what do you think of?
Yeah, and I love this. I love this format because I'm going to be the guinea pig for what probably a lot of people think. When I think of being in prison, I think of violence. I think of being scared. I think of having your crew that you roll with to keep you safe, like you make alliances. I'm just thinking of things I've seen in movies and television shows. I think of abusive guards. I think of terrible food. I think of potentially abusing things like isolation, or doing things that would, I think are probably technically considered illegal, but would almost be like human rights abuse. I do think of a lot of good folks. I think of like Shawshank Redemption, like, oh, there's a library and I can get education. And if I want to
know how hard life in prison can be, you should.
I'm sorry, Jason. Go ahead.
No, you're good. And I think of, what else do I think about? I think about the famous scene in all the movies and television shows of visiting somebody in prison, and either you and I have a piece of glass between us and we can't actually touch each other or give each other a hug, and we pick up an old school phone receiver, or I think of a table sitting and I can maybe like interact with my friends or family, but there's a guard looking over and they yell out that the time is to go and like I have to say goodbye quickly. Those are the things that immediately come to mind for me when I think of if I put myself in prison like what you are. That's what I think about.
And it's if we went out and did a survey of 100 people in society, I would strongly put my money on the fact that the majority of people would think of the same things.
Mm-hmm.
Now the question becomes, where did you get and why do you think those things?
Yeah. Movies, TV, shows like Oz, like shows that like literally about prison life. Movies like The Green Mile, Shawshank Redemption. Obviously, those are both Stephen King books. Stephen King wrote a lot about prisons. And then public perception, like movies and television shows, but also some actual news. Because what makes the news for prisons is, oh, there's a prison break, there was a murder in prison, these like maximum security prisons. What does that look like? Even things like you see like the facilities, even things like The Walking Dead, where they go into a prison and then they have like it always looks like a not great facility every time. Like it always like kind of dank and dark and there's just so many examples of this. But yeah, it comes from pop culture at the end of the day. Not from interviewing people like you who are actually there, that's for sure.
That's right. So the idea of Nike and Just Do It, it's very similar to the public perception of prisons. What we think of prisons and what is in our consciousness about how a prison operates is really from pulp culture. It's what they want to put out. And it's easier. So that this is the other thing. It's easy to dehumanize somebody. It's easy to put somebody down. It's easy to think less of somebody when there's a stigma on that person. Mm-hmm. If you think that a person is a monster, it's much easier to turn your back on the atrocities that's happened to somebody and that is going on with somebody than if you knew that person was a human being, just like you, that created a bad choice. So I think some of it's almost intentionally done, but I also want to say this. Over a period of my life, I had seen movies like American History X, Edward Norton, greatest movies of all times.
Oh, it's amazing.
Shawshank Redemption, Andy Dufresne getting raped by the sisters, brutally raped, right? Brutally raped by the sisters. 50 Cent's Get Rich Died or Trying. There was a brutal shower scene in the beginning of that movie. They go in, strip out, buck naked. And then my perception of prison was like, you got to kill somebody or you're going to be raped. You got to join a gang. You're going to be killed. Or if you remember Adam Sandler, Longest Yard, when he got to the prison, he took the tray and he T-bowed the Native American fella off the chair because they told him you got to take out the biggest and baddest fella in the world when you get there.
Yeah.
So those are the things that they're putting in all of our consciousness. In fact, when my situation happened in 2006, those were some of the thoughts in the back of my mind that scared the life out of me, that created a lot of self-preservation and a lot of bad choice making, because I thought if I was arrested and brought into a prison, in a prison setting, I would have to hurt somebody or I was going to be really hurt.
Yeah.
And that scared me. So public perception is that absolutely and positively that. So 100 people, you ask 100 people that same question. And then I would say the same question prior to meeting me, how many interactions with people in prison did you have? And prior to meeting me, what did that look like for you as far as interactions with anybody in the prison system or people that have left the prison system?
The answer, honestly, is zero. I don't have any friends that are incarcerated. Nobody in my family's been incarcerated. So the answer is zero. I've actually never been in a prison. So the answer is zero. So it's none of it. None of it is from my own experience. It's all from seeing how it's portrayed.
Right. So how many of your friends have been arrested?
Yeah, that's a good question. I I'd think a few, myself included, for a ticket. I ended up in like the local town jail for an afternoon, but that's not the same thing. It's like a holding cell, right? Just like sit there. I don't know, a few, but nobody's ever ended up in a sentence of anything long term at all. It's always like a holding cell, but then whatever they get out. So I can't really think of any friends that have been arrested either, and ended up in like on a sentence inside the penitentiary system.
And if you do know people, I bet you this, I bet you know several people out there, but they don't talk about it. They
Yeah,
don't share. They
sure.
don't bring it up because it's a scarlet letter nobody wants to wear around with them because people are afraid of being judged and criticized and put down and looked. They're afraid of being othered because of a brush with the law or going into the system of mass incarceration. The facts are this: 80 million people today in our society have been affected by mass incarceration. They've had some run in with the law. 1/3 of our population has been in handcuffs at one point or another, which is, think about that for a second.
Yeah.
And there's 2.3, well, if you look at statistics that will show you right now, between 1.9 and 2.3 million people incarcerated. There's 795,000 people returning home every year from county jails and from prisons. Crime is still going on. It's happening everywhere. So prisons aren't stopping crime. What are prisons doing? Are they preventing people from being hurt? I think probably prisons are preventing some people from being hurt because some
Mm-hmm.
people make horrible choices.
Mm-hmm.
But what prisons aren't doing is they're not stopping me from being a human being, which I think is interesting. Or the guys that are here or the women that are in prison, they're still human. And the majority of people in prisons are going to be released one day into society. And whether they succeed or not, I think is dependent upon what you and I are doing right now today and what many people are doing with people in prisons. We're forming relationships and friendships with people on the outside. We're having conversations like this. And in addition, I think what we're doing is we're changing the narrative about what prisons are. So prison to me, I'll share. So now we got out of the way what we believe prisons
Yeah.
are. So prison to me was a place where I came in, I found my recovery. I got involved with education. I got involved with the NAACP, volunteerism. And prison is a place where I've completely changed and shifted my life. And thank goodness for the leadership of Commissioner Liberty, who has brought in a slew of programs. And when I say a slew of programs, I'm talking about a veterans dog program, a yoga program, a meditation program, a welding program, a PhD program where we're actually allowed to get our PhDs. Technology, Dr. Ryan Thornell and the commissioner wrote for a grant, the Maine DOC, where they provided technology to the majority of their residents.
Mm-hmm.
We have a college program where we do business with the Maine, the university system, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a good partnership there. We have partnerships now with the Maine Reentry Network, which is just phenomenal in helping people re-enter back into society. So prison to me is a place, if it's done intentionally, it's a place where somebody can change their life around and heal and become the people that they're intended to be. Now, the majority of people in prison, I got to say this, I don't think anybody I've ever met just said, I'm going to wake up today and be a bad criminal. I think there's a
Right.
buildup, everybody's situation, right? So what happens is I think we pass judgment on people and it's like, this guy is this or this guy is that. And we're defined by the worst choice we've ever made. But what people and what society is failing to do is they're failing to look at the why of behaviors. They're failing to look at, that could have been me too. Like the guy that drives home, people drive home from golf courses every day or from dinner after having a couple drinks, maybe one too many. A little kid could run out in front of you. That's the truth. That's the reality. Or you might have got a little angry when you were younger and you got in a fist fight. You might have hit the dude the wrong way and killed the guy.
Yeah.
But we don't think of those things, or think of the people that cheat on their taxes out there. I mean, honest to God, think of the people that cheat on their taxes out there, and all those folks could be in prison,
Yeah.
but they don't reflect on that. Instead, again, it's easier to pass judgment on people and judge other people. And really it has to do with our shadows, right? It has to do with
Yeah.
our own shadows and what's inside of us.
Yeah. So let's talk now about some things that you've learned. I'm sure you have friends in there, you have colleagues, people like going through educational programs, and you're a well-trained coach and facilitator. So you also facilitate and get a chance to have a position of helping guide fellow people that are incarcerated in various parts of their journey. So what are some things that you've learned about yourself and others that would be different than kind of like what we laid out as maybe the stereotype?
Yeah. So it goes to the why of behavior. The majority of people that are incarcerated deal with low emotional intelligence, and a lot of that is because of adverse childhood experiences and the abuse that they've been through growing up. Dr. Aaron Kipnis wrote a book called Angry Young Men, and it's about 7 pathways to prison, how people end up in prison. And I really appreciated that book and reading that book for many different reasons. And I think the main reason is this: we need to have an understanding of how people do wind up in these situations. Think about school systems. People end up in school systems. They're coming from households that are broken. The school doesn't give a person the attention or the love or the care that they need. Our parents and our homes are so broken today that kids aren't getting the love and care that they need. Our communities, there's kids in everybody's community right now that are suffering and going through something. And I guarantee if we ask the question to almost anybody out there, do you know any little kids that are going through it or have a really rough life? People would raise their hand. And then you would say, I think the next question would be, how many people are helping those kids? And you wouldn't see that many hands come up. And I think that's the other challenge, and the other issue is along the way is people need help and people need support. But despite the fact that they need help and support, people aren't getting it.
Yeah. So that's going to be a great lead in to part of the reason I wanted you to come back, and that's talk about the work that you and some others are doing with the Awakening Exchange. I'm going to get back. We're going to talk about what the Awakening Exchange is, the genesis of it, and what difference it's making right after this. So, Stephen, is there anything else that you've learned that you think we should know?
Yeah, I just believe that we're all better than the worst choice we've ever made. And I think a lot of folks coming into the prison system were dealing with low emotional intelligence, meaning that they had a hard time managing their own emotions. They had a hard time with self-regulation. They had a hard time with relationship management with their families, with their friends. And a lot of that has to do with conditioning and the way somebody was brought up. So saying that, I think if our prisons were more intentional and they provided spaces of healing, spaces where people could chill out that sympathetic response, and allow the parasympathetic response to kick in. So there was more self-regulation. And the more I just went through a heart math training, Jason, and I realized that so often in our lives, we make choices and decisions where we're not coherent, where our lid is flipped. We make choices because we have an emotional reaction or overreaction to things, meaning we get angry, we scream, we holler. Some people get into fist fights. Some people And then you have to remember something. If you throw people that are dealing with a lot of depression or dealing with challenges in their life and they're utilizing mind-altering chemicals or alcohol to treat the depression or treat what they're going through, now their ability to self-regulate is out the window. Now, when
Right.
something happens, they're explosive, they're all over the place. So what I submit is, if we can make prisons more intentional and provide opportunities and programs for people to heal and get better, if we can provide individuals education, by the way, education has shown to reduce recidivism by 43% for an associate and bachelor's degree, for a master's degree, up to 85%.
That's
In a
amazing.
PhD, nobody returns back to prison. So in addition, the Norwegian model has a 20% recidivism rate versus the 77% in the United States. Why? Great question. Well, the Norwegian model looks at the whole person. They take a holistic approach to prison. The punishment is being behind the walls. The punishment is being away from your friends and family and society. That's the punishment. Just because you're being punished there doesn't mean you got to come in those things that you think of, the abusive guards, the horrible visits, the gang affiliations, all that stuff doesn't need to take place, because when a person comes into the system, there's opportunities for them to grow and flourish. And all those other things are a consequence of faulty systems, not the individual themselves. It's the system themselves. And to go back to just do it, we live in a society that people now have been conditioned because of these movies, because of the things we've heard, the things that the news, the media puts out there. So think of Pizzagate scandal. Think of the presidential inauguration. Like they said, there was a huge amount of people there. There wasn't that many people that they claim that were there.
Yeah.
You think of the challenges with the vaccine, like the back and forth with sides on the vaccine and the information that the media put out. So point being is this: I think we have to be a little bit more cognizant of what the media is putting out there. We have to be a little bit more aware that people in prison are better than the worst choice they've ever made. And prison is not the movies. There's so many opportunities for people to grow. I know that's probably the stuff that doesn't sell. People are like, I want to hear the juicy stuff. I want to hear about the
That's
violence.
boring, Stephen.
Does it happen, the violence? Yeah, it happens. But I think
Sure.
the exciting stuff in my life today is seeing guys graduate here with bachelor's degrees that really came in with a GED, seeing guys get hope and meaning in their life, seeing guys change their lives around, working with other people, seeing guys get into recovery, seeing guys like writing their family letters, apologizing, seeing guys doing restorative justice work. These movies, this form of conditioning has created a stereotype. The problem with that stereotype is when everybody in society, the 70 out of 100, are judging us and viewing us a certain way, there becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that takes place. So over a period of time, a person starts believing that about themselves, and that's what's perpetuating the system itself. It's the ideas, the beliefs, and the views of society that they're pushing and reflecting on people in prison. They're saying, hey, you're POS. We're not going to hire you. We're not going to let you live in our house or in our apartment because you're a felon. We're not going to allow you to vote. So we're not even allowing people to return back to the fabric of society. We're saying, hey, you're not part of this fabric. You're different. You're other than us. You're not worthy of a vote. You're not worthy of a job. You're not worthy of living in the place that I run as my apartment complex. You're an other. It's the modern day Jim Crow is what it is. It really is. It's the modern day Jim Crow, my friend.
Yeah. Well, Stephen, I'm feeling called to move us to talk about what you are personally doing. Because when I first met you and we had our first conversation, prior to having you come on the podcast, it's very apparent this is something you're passionate about, and it's not a self-serving thing. Like, yes, you are part of the same population you're talking about, but like you really have a heart for your fellow incarcerated folks. You have a heart for this. And I'd love to hear now and share with the audience and have a conversation around what you're doing with the Awakening Exchange, because one of the things that struck me about what we're about to talk about is this is not something that I would think would be happening. So going back to the stereotypes of what happens in the prison, what are other people doing? Like, this would not be, I would not list this thing on the list of 50 things that happen on a daily basis in a prison in the way that we're about to lay this out. So I'd love to have you lead us now through what the Awakening Exchange is, and maybe to kick off to talk about like a little bit about what it is and what was the genesis for it. So how did you come up with the idea? And again, I love this because you're a fellow podcast host, so you can lead the conversation and I'll ask you questions as I see fit.
Oh, great. Thank you. So the Awakening Exchange was created in my graduate studies at Life University. And the idea was, we live in a system with the low emotional intelligence. We have a tough time with authority because of the abuse most people have experienced with their family members. Some of these guys have been in foster care. Some of them have been through the youth center, and some of the stories that you hear are brutal. And the majority of people don't want to listen to people in authority. Nobody wants to feel like they're being criticized or somebody's holding power over you or looking down. But when you feel like we're doing this together, I mean, when you feel like somebody's beside you on your journey and celebrating with you and uplifting you, that feels better, doesn't it, Jay?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the idea of the Awakening coaching program was, let's take the guys in prison that are doing really, really well. Let's take the guys in prison that are already living as mentors and doing this work without the training, and let's provide them some training to help and uplift other people. And with that, we did a couple trainings here. And every person that's been through the Awakening training now in the prison setting, they have jobs. One of them works for the education department. One of them works for the music department. One of them's running the recovery. One of them's working in IMHU. One of them's, every single person has acquired jobs in leadership. So through that, I presented the Awakening, the coaching program on this exchange. I met John Berghoff, who changed my life from Exchange Approach, learned how to do these exchanges, presented my capstone, and we had an audience of, I think, 68, 69 people. And everybody really appreciated it so much. I was encouraged to keep going. And now, Jay, have you been to a Awakening exchange? Have you got to stop into one yet?
I have not, but I am very much excited to do so. I want to ask about this here. Is this something that anybody can come to?
Yeah. So every month now, great question. Every month now, we run an online exchange about criminal justice and prison reform. We have change champions from around the world. Last month, we had Dr. Ron Garrett. Dr. Ron Garrett runs Reentry United. The month before that, we had State's Attorney Natasha Irving, Maine. She's a district attorney. Next month, we have Isha Braveboy from Maryland. She's a state's attorney. I'm working with Bobby Kennedy's office right now. I'm praying that Robert Kennedy Jr. is going to be a guest on one of my upcoming podcasts. So we have a vast majority of people from different backgrounds that are interested in creating change in the prison system. So we bring people together. Everybody's invited to come. There's no charge. And what we try to do is foster a conversation, and we have these breakout rooms where people can have conversations about prison reform and changing the prison system. And what I found is, I mean, I'm doing this from my prison cell, so it's been an interesting experience, like getting the information out there, everything from surveys to the registration forms to all that. But what I'm finding is so many people are interested, and so many people they want to contribute, they want to learn. And when they come to these things, Jason, they're taking away, what is it really like to be in prison? They're taking away like what we're doing here. Wow, these guys are better than the worst choice they've ever made. Wow, this guy, yeah, back 15 years ago, he was in a fight and somebody lost their life, but this guy isn't a bad guy, or whatever that is. So narratives are changing because of this thing. And what we're doing, it's creating support for other people that are in the system as well.
I have so many questions about this. I think I want to start with, I want to go back to something you said about need to be uplifted, about and people that are incarcerated need to be uplifted. What is it that's uplifting for somebody like yourself? Because I think like that might be arguably a different question for somebody like me who's not incarcerated, and somebody who you have a lot of your freedoms taken away, and you're in a situation where, quite frankly, you don't have as much control. You only have control maybe what's in your mind and a little bit about your body, but you don't have the ability to be like, oh, what's uplifting for me? I'm gonna go down to the store and I'm gonna go meet my friend for a drink or something. Like, you can't do that. So what is something that would be, what's an example of something that you do or that would be uplifting for your community?
So I'm gonna answer that question, but I want to say what's coming to my mind right now is acceptance commitment therapy first, and I want to explain this to you because I think this is important. Really understanding my values has been really, really important to me. My own values are uplifting to me, to have my autonomy and to have certain values in my life. Like, I value respect, I value honesty, I value friendship. And when I say respect to me now simply means to look again at something, again, spect, to look again at something. I value my education, I value my wellness, I value my health, I value other people. And having those values in place for me, what they have done, if you think of acceptance commitment therapy, it has us look at our values. So when situations arise, we're able to observe those situations and not fuse to them. When we fuse, if you think of a fusion, think of water, plain water. And if you add coffee to this water, what happens?
Dilutes.
It becomes coffee, right?
Coffee, yeah, it becomes coffee, diluted coffee.
That's right. So the idea is, rather than putting the coffee in with the water, we keep the coffee separate. The coffee is those issues, those challenges that arrive in our lives. So what keeps me inspired is my values, and keeping my values at the forefront of my consciousness. And because of those values, what really inspires me today is being able to help and give back to other people. So what does that look like for me? Well, I facilitate classes here at the prison, but moreover, I think what I am really inspired to do is to do conversations and have conversations like this, that we get to change the narrative about prisons and what prisons look like. Because everybody, how we started our call, Jason, everybody has that same idea of prisons.
Yeah.
It's brutality. It's the Shawshank Redemption. It's the American History X. It's the brutal rapes and the beatings when in fact, I think we need to start changing the narrative with that and saying, no, prisons are a place of healing. Imagine if we changed it to that. Prisons are a place to healing. It's where you're going to go heal. I get a question, when you take your car into the garage, let's say you had a broken motor, what would happen?
If I take my car to the garage and it's got a broken it's got an engine that needs to be fixed, what would
happen?
What would happen is they would look at it, they would say, your engine's broken, and they would give me a price, and I'd either say, forget it, I'm going to go get a different car, or I would fix the engine.
So you fix the engine, what would happen?
It'll break again eventually. No, I fixed the engine. I could then use it. I can then use it as it's designed for.
Well, you decide to fix the engine in the shop, they're going to have to take the engine out. They're going to put
Yeah.
a new engine in. They're going to change those parts. They're going to make the car run properly so it's safe to put back out on the road again, right?
That's right. Yep.
And you're paying for that too, right? So
Oh yeah.
I love that. So think of that analogy, think of that metaphor for prisons. We come into prison, you're paying in Maine, it's up to $90,000 a year you're paying to house somebody in prison.
Yeah. On the state taxpayers.
State taxpayers are paying people to be in prison. Now, I think state taxpayers would have a little bit more concern because you're taking the car to the shop. The person is coming into prison because there's something broken. There's something that is not lining up with the rules of our society. So something needs to be fixed. The person comes in, there's a diagnostics done. Well, wow, the person has a substance abuse problem. The person has a problem with violence. The person has a problem with whatever it is, just like the car, the motor's blown. The car goes in, the person comes into the prison, the car goes up on the lift. The person goes into their cell. If the car just sits there on the lift and you let it back out on the road, what happens?
It doesn't work.
It's still broken, right?
Still broken. Exactly.
It
Yeah.
needs to come right back into the shop again to get repaired. So utilize that for a human being. A person comes in, they just sit around in their cell, they don't do anything. That's why we have the 77% recidivism rate.
Yeah.
So my thought is this: if a person comes into the prison, people go underneath that car, they do the work, they take the motor out, they put the new motor in, they start the car up, they test it to make sure it's working. Well, a person comes into prison, it's intentional. Now they work on those issues from the diagnostic. They work on their substance abuse. They work on their health. They work on their mindset. They work on their education. They work on their vocational skills. So now people, the lift, everything that's happening underneath the car, the person's doing that work on themselves. Therefore, the money that taxpayers are paying is now going somewhere that's creating good. When the car comes down, the person's leaving their cell to be released back into society. Now they're hitting the streets and they're safe.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That makes a ton of sense. I want to wrap with this for now, which we're going to have to do a 3 or 4 or 5 part. We're just, Stephen, we're going to end up being co-hosts together on some sort of show here. To wrap with this now, like I had a couple of questions about something you said earlier. I always have a million questions, but I'm trying to narrow this down what's in my mind. You mentioned some real success stories, some folks who came in, did the work, end up in positions of leadership. They're doing good things in the world. It sounds like maybe some of them have been released. Some are maybe still in the prison system. Do you have any success stories or examples of people that are resistant to this idea? They come in with a lot of resistance. Hey, I'm willing to come and have these conversations. I know you run like coaching circles inside of the prison system, and as well as Awakening Exchange and all these other things where people are just resistant. They're like, that's not for me. I can't change. This is how I am. And I'm curious, what is the thing that opens them up to different possibility, to I am not going to be one of those 77%. I want something different for my life. Because I would imagine there's no one answer for that, right? Because each of us are unique. But I would imagine there's something that you've noticed as a trend of like either maybe it's a character trait, maybe it's something like an experience that has people go, oh, there is something different. I'm curious what you've seen around that. I don't know what the specific would be, but there's has to be some commonality there.
Yeah, it's the mentality of what we had talked about earlier. It's the mentality of the stereotyping that happens from movies and the things that we've watched that creates that kind of attitude because a person feels hopeless. What I've seen to be the thread that is in everybody's story of change is somebody believes in that person. There's love. people believe that person can change. They believe in that person's capacity to be a better person. They encourage the person, they support the person, and they let that person know that they're loved and cared about. Because when somebody feels loved and cared about, now there's a reason to move forward to make those changes. When I'm feeling hopeless, watch out. When I
Yeah.
feel hopeless in my life, like there's nothing to work for, nobody cares about me, that's where a lot of people are at. They come in and they feel like nobody cares about them. They feel like they're judged. They just went through a horrific, if anybody's been through court out there, I don't care if it's a divorce or if it's a speeding ticket,
No, it's
court is a
brutal.
challenging thing to go through.
Yeah.
People's faces, I'm working with a guy right now. He came in on a drug charge, and he ran a business as well. So running that business, he wasn't able to finish a job. And because he couldn't finish the job, they put felony charges on him because of a contractor thing, where if you're in the middle of a job, you don't finish it, and he couldn't finish it. So he's like feeling hopeless because there's more and more charges. And it's like, you can't allow that to drag you down. You got to move forward, pay the people back, do what you need to do. And having somebody that believes in him, like we're a group of guys now that meet every Thursday night for a positive mindset group. That's what I've seen. Like people, when people love, Candace Powell came into this prison and gave a lot of us love and showed a lot of us what love is, unconditional love with transformative leadership. Man, that changed the commissioner. This right here, believing in me and giving me
Yeah.
enough trust to be online with you, that changes people.
Yeah.
So I really believe, Jason, I really, really believe what we need to do is we need to start singing songs of love and celebration of people in prison that are getting out doing better, instead of perpetuating this narrative of violence, of otherish, of somebody's worse than somebody is the worst thing that they've ever done, because they're not. Nobody wants to have a scarlet letter. Nobody.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to make a call out to people listening. For those listening, you obviously care about this topic, or maybe you just think Steven is an amazing human like I do. Or it's probably, we know it's not me, Steven. So maybe it's you, maybe it's the topic, or it's probably a combination of the both. I am going to encourage everybody listening to join an Awakening Exchange circle. I don't know if you call it a circle or if you just call it a meeting, but I am going to attend one as soon as I can. And so, Steven, let's talk about what's available to us to learn more about this topic and see the sort of work that you're doing.
Yeah, you can go to www.awakeningexchange.com. You can find me on on LinkedIn as Stephen Matthew Clark. You'll see the symbol behind me on my LinkedIn photo, so it'll be easy to recognize me. Let's connect and come to an Awakening Exchange. We usually run the exchanges on the last Thursday of every month from either 3 to 5 or 5 to 7 Eastern time. This month, we're working with Don Cabarello from ACE Overcomers, talking about adverse childhood experiences. We have Dr. Steven from Heart Math. He's going to come run a little bit of heart math exercises and teach us a little bit about chilling out our sympathetic response system and building self-regulation. Next month, we have State's Attorney Aisha Braveboy, who's going to come on and talk about changing the Maryland prison system and the work that she's doing. So please, if you go to www.awakeningexchange.com, you can register for our events. That should be directing you to Sutra. You have to register to get in. It will put you on our mailing list. If you're on that mailing list, we will be sending you out each month. We'll send you out information. We'll send you newsletters. We'll send you updates with members, different things members are going on. So please get involved. We need your love and we need your support. Men and women in the prison system, we don't need judgment. We need acceptance. And the greatest gift in the world, Jason, first of all, I want to say I admire you too. Jay's not sharing this with everybody and hasn't shared this. He just got back from Uganda on a mission to help people with clean water. So this guy's remarkable as well. He's also a
Thank you.
light being and a heart-centered person doing really amazing work. I think that's why we're able to connect so much.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate it. You've ruined Steven, stop it. Look, what a good coach and facilitator. He's like, by the way, I'm going to out you. That's really good. Well, Steven,
Out you. I don't know if it was outing you. I just want to celebrate you for the work that you're doing as well, my dear friend. Goodness gracious, so
yeah,
many people run these podcasts and they put people on pedestals and lift people up, but sometimes I think it's important that we lift each other up. And you're also
yeah.
doing really good work in the world,
Oh,
because
thank you.
how many people, this is the other thing I want to say is, you have an interest in what we're doing in the system of mass incarceration. You are bringing a light into this dark system. So with that in and of itself is service work, my dear friend.
Yeah.
And,
Well, it's the least I can do. I really appreciate it. As we were talking here, I'm going to out myself that I was multitasking. I just registered for the event next week. It's next Thursday from 5 to 7 Eastern time. I will be there because I want to learn more about this. For those, I'll wrap with this for now. And yes, Stephen, you're going to be back on here again. What else can people do if people can't make an exchange but they say, hey, like, I'm really interested in learning more? What else would you recommend that people can do that are listening, that are interested?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think the first thing that you can do is, if you know somebody in prison, most people do, believe it or not, most people know somebody in prison. If you know somebody in prison, reach out to them, send them a letter, just send them a hello and let them know you're thinking about them. If you feel like, oh, it's been so many years, I'm kind of scared, I don't want to reach out. Well, let me tell you this. It's been years since I've talked to people, and I'd love to hear from them. I don't form judgment or pass judgment. People in prison would love to hear from you.
Yeah.
Knowing that somebody cares about us is huge. So you can do that. Get involved and have an interest in what's going on in our prison systems, because the stuff that Jason was talking about earlier in the call, the abuse, the gangs, all that different stuff, that stuff can exist if we're not shining a light into these dark places. So you're spending a lot of money every year with your tax dollars housing people in your local prisons. That's the truth.
Yeah.
If we could redirect and help people heal, that money could be so better used for schools, for roads, for our elderly, for our veterans. So there's so many other places that money could be allocated. Get an interest and have an interest. And then you can always go to Awakening Exchange on Better World. That's another way that you can help. If you're interested in donating, we have a donation page set up. And then I guess the last way, if you know anybody in this space that's doing criminal justice reform, that's a change champion, reach out to me. I'd love to interview them. I'd love to have a conversation with them. And, collaboratively, it's not an individual approach in anything we do in this world. It has to be a collaborative approach.
Yeah.
So this little part here being on this podcast, anything you can contribute, we'd appreciate, even if it's just your attendance or a question.
Yeah.
So
we'll put all of those in the chat. The last thing I'll say around this is, and I don't remember the name of it, but I know there are multiple nonprofits where you can write anonymous letters, where you can just reach out to people in prison and just like write a letter, tell somebody that I don't even know you, but I'm thinking about you. You are loved, and all of those wonderful things. And, it's apropos that we're recording this here the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. This is a lonely time of year for all sorts of people in this world. I can imagine can be a very lonely time for those who are in prison this time of year. So we'll put all that in the chat, or not in the chat. We'll put all that in the show notes. And again, I said this the last time I had you on, Stephen, but for those who haven't realized they should connect with you yet, they really should. Knowing you, like, you would love to connect with just about anybody, as long as they've got something, bringing a heart-based conversation, and just a great person to get to know. You can see that you've made a difference for me in my life, and I told you that. And I just really appreciate having you on again and getting your time and your energy. And I can't wait to see you at the exchange next week. I'm at the Awakening Exchange. I'm really excited about experiencing what that is and learning more about this. So my wife and I, we can make an impact on folks. We're in the state of New York, which has a lot of really famous and not so nice prisons like Rikers and Sing Sing. And I don't think Sing Sing's around, but we have a lot of prisons here in New York.
There's a lot, yeah. And the place that what he was talking about, ladies and gentlemen, there's a place you can go to. It's www.flickshop.com. It's FLIK shop.com. And they have a place on there. If you register, you get a couple free postcards that you can send into somebody in prison. And there's a place on there, I think it's an angel program, or you can just send a postcard into somebody. It goes to somebody
Amazing.
That's in the prison system. I think that's huge. And then a friend of mine, her name is Valerie Cartonio. She runs Prison Podcast. She is currently interviewing death row inmates, people that are on death row in North Carolina. And death row, what a lot of people don't know, 1 out of 8 people on death row end up getting exonerated. So a lot of people sitting on death row right now are actually folks that are either innocent or have been overly charged for things. I would there's so many different topics and issues within criminal justice to be aware of and get involved with, but a place to start is just reaching out to somebody in your prison system or talking to somebody, having a conversation with somebody. And a great place to do that is the Awakening Exchange. Again, if you're interested in showing up, you have the website. Jay will put information in at the end in the chat. And then Better World Awakening.betterworld.org, I believe, is our site that we use for sponsorship and for help. So it's awakening.betterworld.org. And what that does, that just helps us run the exchanges, that helps us with the work that we're doing. So any
Beautiful.
love, help, and support that you want to give, we're open arms for it all.
Open it. Yeah.
Jay, I love you, brother. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, buddy.
I love the notion of exploring, maybe coming forward and maybe reaching out to hear what topics people would be interested in, what the listeners are interested in.
Yeah, absolutely.
So throwing that out, what do they want to know about? And then we can answer some questions from some viewers, and maybe even doing it live stream where people can come in with their own questions.
Love to. Yeah. The last thing I'll say here is I was just looking at Flick Shop because I couldn't remember the name of it. Created by Marcus Bullock, who was in prison when he was 15. He went for 8 years. He created this because it saved his life, because his mother was able to send him letters and photos. And what he's created is an app and a whole web presence. And he did a TED Talk on this. So I cannot wait to watch his TED Talk now. Brilliant. What an amazing thing. Yeah.
Guy.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, Stephen, I want to wish you a very happy Thanksgiving. And I really appreciate seeing you again, having you on here. Appreciate your wisdom, what you're doing with the thing. I will see you next week at the Awakening Exchange. I don't know if it's a webinar style or if we're actually going to see each other on Zoom. I think it's actually a Zoom, so we'll see you.
It's an exchange style. Yeah, you'll see me.
Oh yeah, you're like, not only will I see you, you'll be doing all sorts of formats that you and I know that we learned from the exchange approach community. Well, brother, it's been, again, wonderful, and we'll have you back on again soon. Call out to the audience if you have any specific questions, you can send them in to my website. You can connect with Stephen directly, and we will make sure that we have another session where we answer those, and we might even live stream it, like you said.
That'd be pretty cool. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Thanks, Stephen.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Talking to Cool People with Jason Frizzell. If you enjoyed today's episode, please tell your friends. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and give us a shout out, or take a moment to leave a review on iTunes. If something from today's episode piqued your interest and you'd like to connect, email us at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com. We love hearing from our listeners because you're cool people too.